increasingly we have started sending professionals abroad, professionals in various fields, and doing extremely well. Not just the Gulf, but all over the world. Our diaspora is admired. In fact, there is envy now in the US, for instance. So I think on multiple criteria, India has seemed to have done very well. But we still have a long way to go, particularly as far as delivery of public goods to our people. And there, if I don't know, I'm preempting a question of yours. This book talks very well about the democratic dividend. But in my personal opinion, the democratic dividend is nullified unless you're able to clothe, feed, educate, upskill. I mean, there were some statistics that I think 65% of the population of India is between 25 and 65, and about, I think, 14% below, or 25% below the age of 14. Now, this is something which can be a dividend and also be a curse, because a liability, because if we are not able to provide jobs, if we are not able to educate them, if you're not able to provide primary health, and this book talks about where we can sort of really do much more as a government. And also what I like about this book, it also talks about public-private partnerships. Because in India, and I think this is a colonial sort of legacy, that for my Baap Sarkar, the government should do everything. I think the government cannot do everything. No government, not the country the size of 1.4 billion, and with the background that we have, the colonial sort of depredations, etc., our economy ruined in 47. It has to be a concerted effort, and I think soon, and I think it is happening, but it needs to happen much more, particularly as far as employment is concerned, upskilling is concerned, but even education and primary health care. I think it's very important that happens. And when that happens, and when India starts climbing the indices, various indices, obviously perceptions will change even further, positive perceptions. Of course, right now, ideology also plays a role as far as perceptions are concerned. But I think generally people recognize that what India was in 47 and what it is now, there is this huge difference, and India has made tremendous strides. Again, I qualify that the glass is half full.
Thank you. Okay, I think we covered a bit of the next question. Yes, so political funding, corruption, rating agencies, So recently, one of the rating agencies retained India's current rating, and one of the factors they gave in retaining is India's been looking for an upgrade, right? So Fitch came back saying, no, we're not upgrading you, India, and one of the critiques was corruption, right? And if you look at corruption indices, India sadly is high meaning not good. Right? One of the comments that's been made, and Dr. Pachauri said something earlier too, is that the cost of our elections is now so massive. In 2024, the figure was something like 100,000 crores. It's just being spent on elections. So Dr. Pachauri put forth an argument, which is, listen, let's just make this all open. So whoever wants to donate, if I want to donate 10 lakhs to so-and-so party or so-and-so individual, let it all become, totally transparent and out there. And that's possibly something we need to look at. Yash, do you have a different perspective on it, or do you want to add to?
No, I think I in principle agree with what Dr. Pachauri said, particularly about the transparency, the openness. The electoral bonds is something that, as CIC, as Chief Information Commissioner, I listened to, I heard a number of cases where the appellant was seeking information regarding the anonymous donor. Now, the bank, State Bank of India in this case, would refuse to divulge the details. And I found that very strange, because in most transparent democracies, the names of the donor need to be divulged. And when we had lawyers arguing the case, even in a limited hearing like a quasi-judicial hearing like in the CIC, you had then arguing that the donors are big corporates who do not want their names to appear sort of donating to one camp or the other, because when the other camp comes to power, the other coalition or alliance or party comes to power, they will wreak vengeance on that group. So I found that, I mean, it's true. It's because our system works that, unfortunately. It shouldn't, but it does. But that is no justification for anonymity, in my opinion. But one point that he mentioned about, openness and transparency, he used President Trump's example about his dinners, etc. One thing that doesn't happen here, which I see the positive, is the conflict of interest. At least not so, legally, it's not possible. And I have seen places, and I'll give you examples. For instance, in Sri Lanka, you had a situation where the defense secretary was a big industrialist. So he carried on his business on the side. And in the bargain, as defense secretary, there was a conflict of interest. It didn't matter. Similarly, in the US, you have a situation where the current occupant of the White House is a wealthy man, and his family, though he claims that he has cut himself off from the family, but we know for a fact that when the crypto deals or the real estate deals are being signed, etc., the family benefits because a prominent member of that family is sitting in the White House. Now in India, even if that happens, it would not happen so quickly. It would be because there would be laws preventing. For instance, when I became CIC, I had to sort of give an affidavit, an undertaking, that there was no other profit job or the work that I was doing, because that would disqualify me for the job, and obviously I was not, and I gave that. So I think there is the upside and there is the downside. I think whatever is more transparent and where the people can judge, and you mentioned the RTI Act, it was, I think, a singularly sort of excellent model, an excellent piece of legislation which got the best from the world, because there were other countries who adopted the Right to Information or the Freedom of Information Act earlier. We picked really the best from there. The problem became later in the implementation. And that is where I think there was something about implement. Your father was saying that. He was absolutely right. Because with the best of intentions, with the best of legislation, our Constitution is an example, unless you are able to implement the provisions properly, you will always suffer from a lack of governance or a governance gap, and there will be a problem.
On a more positive note, sorry, I just want to add one or two points here. On a more positive note, you see, India right now said we have a population of 140 million, or 140 crores. Now, I think that during the British times, there was hardly a year when there was no famine. And the last famine that took place was in 1943 and 44, lasting almost up to 45, up to independence. People starved. Bengal was starving, there were millions of deaths. There was no censorship at that time, nothing, and nobody knew what was happening. Now the biggest achievement of our times, I feel, I don't know, there may be some of you who will disagree with me, and please do. We are giving free rations to about 100 crore people today. Nobody is dying of starvation. That's perhaps the biggest achievement of our country. If you have a case of starvation or any kind of hunger, it comes out in the press. We have a very good press system in this country. Any tragedy of this sort, it comes out. So we are feeding, this is one of the greatest achievements in my mind, to feed 100 crore people in this country from all parts of the country. And the other positive thing that has happened is also, during the pandemic, this system of food was continued. People migrated miles and miles from this part of the country to that part of the country. Lives were saved, vaccination was done. Plus, as we believe in, I think you'll agree with me, being a diplomat, we believe in the principle of Vasudev Kutumbakam. And in this vaccine Maitri, we provided vaccines to 90 countries. So there are some positives also. India really shined during the pandemic. That was one of our greatest achievements.
Thank you for that. So,
Can I just add to that, if you don't mind, sorry. No, I can, Dr. Pachauri mentioned vaccine mandatory, and I must elaborate on that. Because the New York Times, if you read, had people, bodies strewn all over, flame, cremation, fires lit along the Ganges. That was India and the pandemic, and so many people died. Of course, it sort of suppressed the news that there were more people dying in the United States at that point of time. So, but what India did during COVID is an example of, proper leadership and delivery to a large extent. And there, again, public-private partnership, development of those vaccines. Because the fact is that the West turned its back on the rest of the world. Either you had those Chinese vaccines which were available in Dubai, and some of the people said it didn't really, was not as effective. It took us longer, but what we came up with, and to vaccinate 1.4 billion people is a huge task. And what the government was able, and then we shared the fruits of our development, not just with our neighbors, but islands in the Caribbean. I remember Prime Minister going to the St. Kitts or Nevis that gave him the highest award because of what India donated, just 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 vials or whatever. But the fact that we gave it, and we gave it free in most cases, especially the least developed countries. So that sort of made a huge impression in those countries where we did it. May not be the United States or the UK, but certainly in St. Kitts or Nevis or Sudan or Sri Lanka or wherever else. So that is a very important sort of initiative of the government, but really paid off and helped change perceptions. That's your first question that you'd asked.
thank you. So, after recently somebody told me, he said, with Trump, I don't know whether your book has any relevance because there is no more governance. But, so I think Trump has changed the whole discussion point and platform for it. But second thing linked to Trump or geopolitics, and let me put up the context slide. Yes. So we've had, or we are witnessing changes in the world order. So Yash, this is more to you. So whether it's US tariffs, whether it's China upping the game on technology and introducing their own version of H-1B visas, etc., it sort of raises the question of the entire supply chain resilience, global manufacturing hubs. How can India take advantage of this opportunity? Because the link with governance is when it comes to ease of business, rule of law, enforcement of contract, things of that sort are all part of the conversation when you're selling India as an investment destination.
I think we must acknowledge that the age that we're living through now is an age of disruption and turmoil, because the rules-based sort of international system is more or less collapsed. And it's easy to blame Trump. Of course, he is the prime mover there. But the whole global system was working towards a situation where either you have a duopoly, a G2 as they call it, or you have what is called the Thucydides trap, where a superpower, a pole, starts fading. In Greek history, Athens challenged Sparta. Similarly, China is challenging the US. But the problem is that they control a lot of the supply chains, particularly China, because the whole world, including India, outsourced manufacturing to China. For instance, our Diwali murtis and our firecrackers, it was really shocking when I read that it was
Not
made
to mention the Ganesha murtis.
Ganesha, exactly. So they're
Ganesha
being
murtis.
made in China. So obviously the profit motive is what that the cost of production was lower. But on a more serious note, when you have things like rare earths and magnets and critical minerals, you realize that the supply chain is all centered around China. And China is using that to weaponize. Like Trump has weaponized tariffs, China has weaponized supply chains. And that is why when people talk about China plus one and India being that plus one or Vietnam or whatever, we still really can't achieve that, because even for instance, when Apple makes iPhones in India, you still need critical parts from China. You still need Chinese technicians and engineers to come to help you finish the product. So we can proudly say, and I was in the US last month, that 25% of all the iPhones sold in India are now made, in the US is made in India. It's partially true, because a lot of the components still come from China. So I think we need to rid ourselves of dependence on one or two or three countries. And how does that happen is something that we have chosen, what we call the path of Atmanirbhar. Now, it's a very good goal, very good objective, but it will not happen overnight. It will take time. For instance, APIs in pharmaceuticals, rare earth. We have our own rare earth, but we have what, a rare earth development corporation or something, RECN, if I'm not mistaken, which is completely defunct. Because I recall when I was in Sri Lanka, I contacted them because they had some rare earth on the eastern coast of Sri Lanka, and the government was very keen that a partner helps them develop. And we couldn't take advantage. The Chinese wanted to come in because they were already so developed. So I think we really need to seize the advantage. It is already late, but it's never too late. So whether it's defense, whether it's pharmaceuticals, ask friends, or even rare earth, I think we've of course made a beginning, particularly in defense. We're doing very well now, but we really need, in this age of disruption, to try and carve our own path. You cannot be, because the world is integrated, the global economy is integrated, so you can't be alone in that path. But you need these many alliances. For instance, what I read in the papers yesterday or today about a tech alliance between Australia, Canada, and India. And that's very good. We are all, the three of us are middle powers really, but Australia and Canada in particular have a lot to offer as far as technology is concerned. So if there's technology denial from, say, China or from the US, we can look elsewhere. So that is why India is being described as a hedging power that hedges and tries to sort of compensate for loss of influence in one sphere with alliances, partnerships, etc., in another sphere or with another group of countries. And that will help us in the long run. There is some amount of despondency among foreign policy analysts that right now India is isolated. That's really not true. We have a problem with Mr. Trump and on tariffs. We will probably resolve that sooner than later. I hope sooner than later, because it does impact our economy. But we are also looking for partners elsewhere. For instance, the trade deal with the EU is likely to fructify soon. It's a mutual interest. Earlier, I never felt that there would be a deal. When I was in the UK, I always felt that a deal with the UK is possible as long as there was political will. And both sides, the Tories before and the Labour government now, displayed that political will and concluded a treaty. And that agreement may not be the best, but it's certainly going to be mutually beneficial for both sides. And the UK is of course a small country, and the EU is much larger. So any deal with the EU that more or less follows the same, covers the same ground that the India-UK treaty does, it will help us. We have treaties with Australia, with the UAE. We try to rework with the ASEAN, with Japan. So I think there are immense possibilities, provided we are able to grasp those opportunities. And what holds us back is, unfortunately, our own systems, whether it's procurement and defense, whether or even manufacturing, partnering, etc. The red tape that infuses our system, to a large extent, a lot of it has been sort of cut, but there still exist layers and layers that we need to overcome to follow successful practices. And the best we can do is to follow the best practices that other countries have, whether it's on defense procurement or on manufacturing or on just ease of doing business. This government has worked very hard in these initial years to improve our standing, but there's much more that we can do.
Let me get us to a very local subject, one of Delhi pollution, because I think, I mean, it's not anything covered in the book, but something which I believe that, you know, there's a structural flaw in the way the matter is addressed today. So it's not a lack of effort, it's not a lack of funding, but you have arguments, LG versus CM, you have 3 municipal corporations, okay, it becomes 1. Then you say Delhi versus Punjab versus Haryana. So there is no authority who has ownership of it. Dr. Pachauri, can the government innovate and say, all right, look, this is an issue, it's been going on year after year, I'm going to change structure and put so-and-so body, which is now has authority over half a dozen other entities, to make it happen?
I believe it can be done. You see, earlier we used to have the planning commission, which started the green revolution, for instance, in the 60s, when we were short of food. We made massive efforts. India became self-sufficient and self-reliant in food. Similarly, we had the white revolution for milk production. So now today we have what you call the Niti Ayog, which is given a certain task. That body can find a way or set up a task force to overcome this pollution problem and come out with some positive steps. But it will require some sacrifices. Sacrifices will be trucks will not be allowed to enter Delhi, vehicles which emit gases will not be allowed. There are some regulations about cap 1, cap 2, cap 3. So there must be the will to do it. But we have a think tank, the Niti Ayog. If they are given that task, I'm sure they will be able to deliver. And also, you see now, if you remember, all of you are all managemental experts. In America, Elon Musk was made the chief of the Department of Government Reforms. So you all as management experts, as young people, should come out with some ideas on this subject. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, and I don't know what he's done. He's made help with the American system of management, or whether he's reformed it or not. But we have one very good opportunity in India. The government has launched what you call the aspirational district system. Now, India has about 900 districts, all told, out of which they're picking up the most backward districts with the most backward parameters, aspirational districts, and all inputs are being given. The best administrators are put there, the best inputs, all the schemes of the government are. So even to discover these rare earths could be done if these aspirational districts were charged to do certain jobs, and each district come out with a new idea and a new discovery of some sort. So we can do it, but the lack of the will is there. There must be a political will, most important.
Okay, let's do something slightly off the program. I'm going to open the floor to questions from the audience, because I've got more questions, but just in case one of you cover them, then I won't ask them, all right? So the floor's open to anybody in the audience who wants to ask our panelists a question. Can I? Do you want a mic there? Come, please. There's.
Thank you so much, sir, for the session, and I'm sure the insights that you have shared regarding the book will surely motivate everyone in the room to definitely give it a read. My question is regarding the pollution discussion that was being discussed recently. I just wanted to know, I mean, we have seen it a lot of times that there's a lack of coordination between different government bodies when it comes to tackling pollution, and various other issues are there as such. What would be your opinion, and what do you think how we can tackle such kind of issues, or such issues as in like where there can be we can eliminate this coordination thing, like there's a miscoordination. Thank you so much, sir.
I'll tell you, because I wanted to say something on pollution after Dr. Pachauri. I think we need to take hard decisions, which we don't. Unfortunately, our system is such, and I don't blame any particular person or party or official. Our system just refuses to take hard decisions. Now, you and I, we live in the NCR, we have got used to it to some extent. But the damage that's being done to us, only time will tell. So I think, and I've seen in London, for instance, they introduced a system where they stopped private cars coming into the centre of London. And if you did, if I recall correctly, and if somebody has, because I left London 7 years ago, it was £10 an hour for a private car to go into central London. So that was a hard decision. People cribbed. Boris Johnson, when he was mayor in London, he built these huge cycle lanes. So the drivers had less space to drive. And that was, and he himself told me the reason why he did that was not because there were so many cycles traveling, to discourage cars from coming in. And that made a difference. Similarly, Beijing, the Beijing Olympics, the decisions that they took. Of course, people say Beijing is an autocratic, China is a communist state, an autocratic leadership, etc. But these are excuses. Because the fact is that public health is very important, and if you have to take drastic decisions, please do so. We look up to the Supreme Court, like GRAP, for instance. You mentioned GRAP 1, 2, 3, 4. Even there, the figures are being manipulated because they don't want to introduce GRAP 4 because that has its own consequences. So we do. I remember when odd and even was introduced. What did we do? We looked around. If somebody had an odd car, even car, your cousin, friend, or yourself, if you had, you get an odd and even if you could, but you're not supposed to, it's a lottery. But anyway, people bought second-hand cars, to beat the system. So I think we really need to take those hard decisions. Just today I read that there are 300 thermal power plants around Delhi. 300-kilometer radius. Not 300 plants, maybe less, but in the 300-kilometer radius of Delhi, there are a large number of power plants who are supposed to have carbon dioxide controlling mechanisms, and out of 100 odd, only 20 have. Now these are things. Now we know what carbon dioxide can do as far as the environment is concerned. And it's just a small problem. You have the Parali burnings, the fire that contributes, but it's not just that. There's a host of other factors. I was in Chandigarh 2 weeks ago. The AQI was, it's the middle of Punjab there. The AQI was 70 or 60 or something. It was very nice. It was fantastic compared to Delhi. So I think we need to take hard decisions. And once Delhi does it, then the rest of northern India will follow, because Delhi being the capital. Because right now, again, when you were abroad, everybody talks about the AQI in Delhi. They used to talk about the AQI in Beijing. Now the conversation is AQI in Delhi. So I think we really need to take hard steps, and those steps can only be taken if the public, the people also cooperate. The law enforcement, up to a point, the government will set, but all of us have to observe it. We always think on how we can find a loophole to go around that regulation, which is unfortunate. So we really, it is a combined effort that's really required, and it must be done on a war footing, because we can't let the situation drift. And I'm not saying we're letting it drift, but I'm just saying the situation is so bad that it continues to remain bad. You cannot afford that.
I'll just add one point to this. It came out in the press. You see these monitoring stations which are set up in Delhi. It was discovered that the machinery that's kept there, that area they water very well, so that the result comes out to be good. They don't bother about the monitoring of the remaining, and so they watered that place. They've covered all the bad spots. They've covered all the chimneys and everything, so that the monitoring machine will do its job and give a very good result. But that's only for that limited area. and they are corrupt. There is a corrupt practice in measuring the pollution. That's the sad part of it. So you have an answer for that, if you can.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so that overlaps with data and corruption, themes that were picked up earlier. Anyone else?
My name is Irfan Rizvi and I happen to teach here, try to teach here, I must say. I had about an hour to go through the book when it was displayed here. And what I really liked about the book was the candidness. So, Mr. Budhiraja has not pulled his punches, he has given it. And that's a whiff of fresh air because normally you don't get to see people talking about, at least in today's time. And so he has raised many questions, and our governance, if you look at it, the tendency of tomorrow would be better than, so we are targeting 2047. By then half the population would be dead. And we already talk about the demographic dividend, okay? And so I would like to have your comments. I'm sorry if I'm being a little longer in speaking myself. We have seen the demographic dividend, which what happened in Bangladesh, what happened in Nepal, and there is a similar kind of a crisis growing in India because of rising unemployment and this, that, and the other. So therefore, the question is that when we talk about governance, and so another thing which has become a slogan today is that double engine and triple engine. And let's take a simple example of Delhi, that we have triple engine operating. We have pollution, and you said something about Mr. Sinha that, in Chandigarh it was 70, in the heart of Punjab where we played the Parali, which contributes only 2.4%. Large contribution comes from the vehicular, vehicles coming in and other things. Simple things, somehow I feel when we talk about governance, there has to be a body which is supposedly be taking decisions, okay? And Niti Aayog, or for that matter, Planning Commission. This absence of this, wherein no one is responsible, because it is being talked about that institutions are marginalized or more or less. So we talk about caged parrot, now there are enslaved parrots. How do we go about dealing with this? And we expect, the people who went about, simple question of pollution, went about protesting that our children are aged, are sick, are suffering because of pollution. And the governance system is as such that they are penalized, put behind bars for this, raising the issue. So in such a situation, what kind of responsive governance can we create? And how do we ensure that the lives of people changes before the utopian 2047? Thank you very much.
I will give an answer to this. You see, in our system, only when a crisis emerges and it goes to the brink, literally to the brink, when people become desperate, there is a response. You take the example of the farmers' agitation about two or 3 years ago. They agitated, they climbed up the Red Fort, they did this, they did that. It was only when things came to the extreme that they withdrew the legislation. The entire farmers' agitation was against the legislation that was about the new legislation. So there were agitations, then finally they withdrew the bill. So I think let us not reach that point where we'll become desperate and only people are going to suffer. So somebody must take up the cause of this pollution crisis very seriously. And I think Parliament is the main forum for this. I don't know, in Parliament they don't have the time to discuss Delhi's pollution. That's a sad part of it.
No, I think I completely agree. The Delhi government is responsible. Niti Aayog obviously formulates policy. If you're looking for where does the buck stop as far as pollution in Delhi, it's the Delhi government. But I would like to disagree with you, if I may, on your analysis of what happened in Nepal or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. It's not going to happen in India. There is a reason. Because I've been to those countries, I've served in Sri Lanka. You can't compare apples and oranges. India is too big. But I get your point about employment. There is frustration. And it's not that there haven't been attempts to incite such movements. it's called Gen Z in Nepal. There were attempts in India too, and I'm not going to talk about them. It's not the forum to talk about them. But I get your point about people, and you can push the people up to a point to know more. And as far as pollution is concerned, I think the people of Delhi and the NCR are reaching that tipping point. And I'm glad that students and older people, everyone now is talking about it. I mean, everyone wakes up in the morning and checks the AQI on the phone. So this is, I think, a realization which, in my opinion, is for the better. I do hope that translates into action.
So I'm picking 2 points here. I think one is the question raised the concern which the panel had said, which is that, look, the demographic dividend can also become a challenge or a liability, and I think that's the question you raised. Secondly, the hope and desire of the book, if we start putting social and governance indicators higher up the pecking order, that we're not a society that waits for emergencies and end panics before action is taken, right? Now, sadly, the onus is on you who are the next generation, which is in your conversations, in your belief system, move to that way of thinking. Today, I don't have that much faith in the media, which is another platform of God. We haven't really spoken about it, that wasn't covered here. Which is otherwise, in some communities, the media plays a role of driving something up the agenda, then action is taken, right? But civic, to me, a lot of India's solutions have to come from civic-minded individuals, which on the one hand, accept the hard decisions that Mr. Sinha spoke about, and at the other hand, become a little bit more vocal, not aggressive necessarily, but just a little more assertive on saying, listen, I need a better quality of life, now give it to me. Right. Who else? Sorry.
Now the other thing is that we didn't touch on, we discussed governance in general, we discussed about the system of justice in our country. If you remember, it's about 15 or 20 years ago, Delhi buses were run on petrol and diesel. That was stopped because somebody went and filed a PIL in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court intervened and gas was used for running buses in public transport. So some PIL must come up. I think that if the Supreme Court directs the government that jolly well you will get this job done in a month or 15 days, otherwise we're going to send you out of office. Some such thing should happen, maybe from the Supreme Court, might be the final answer, because nobody at the administrative or political level is doing anything. But it has happened. Earlier, gas-based vehicles were run because of the Supreme Court order. Sheila Dikshit was the Chief Minister and she implemented public transport by gas. Scooters, autos, taxis, they all run on gas. So I think that stage is coming, somebody will file a PIL and maybe then you might have an answer.
I think Luke Coutinho has filed one. Nutritionist. Any other question from the?
Thank you so much, sir, for such an enriching discussion. Thank you so much, sir, for such an enriching discussion. So, you briefly touched upon the topic of corruption. So, my question is from corruption only. Like, India is spending heavily to build its infrastructure. We are building road, railways, canals, dams, and whatnot. So, in this process of the bidding, though we have taken the bidding process online, but still there is corruption and the system is rigged. And even after the project is allotted, the bureaucrats take their cut, the local MP, the local MLA take their cut. And after that, the quality of the project really deteriorates. So how we can ensure that the infrastructure that we build is of quality and the entire amount that is sanctioned is not lost at the hands of corruption?
Well, I think one way is digitization of administration. Because you see, you have the Aadhaar card. At least people can approach the authorities. Now, I'll tell you one thing, a simple thing. and I think my friend Yash will be able to verify that. Earlier, in long time back, I think when I was in the government, to get a passport was a 6-month exercise. To the 6-month exercise, you had to file an application, you had to go to the office, you had to talk very friendly to the person, when can I get this? They said, oh no, this application is going to take time. And then you went again, and again you stood in the queue. Then again he raised some objection or the other. And then finally, if you're wise enough, you gave a tip to the peon or the clerk, and he says, okay, I'll put up your file fast, don't worry, it'll be done. Finally, there used to be a police inquiry, and then I think 6 months was the normal time to get a passport. Luckily today, you can get your passport, I think, in a week or 10 days. Similarly, IT returns, that was again a nightmare, real nightmare. You could never hope to get your IT return on time, and the harassment, the questions and the delays, it used to be a 1-year affair. But luckily now, IT is also online. You can get your return filed and you can get results in about a month or so without any problem. And you get a refund also, mind you. Earlier, refund was something as though it's a gift from heaven. Literally, I'm telling you, it was a gift from heaven if you got a refund. But nowadays, you get a refund. You get a refund from the on your online, on your computer. You got a refund, and it's easy. So some such thing can be done, and you can get things done faster without the infrastructure getting damaged.
So e-governance in terms of bidding
Yeah.
transparency is being suggested as
Also public procurement. Now it's all been digitized. There is always scope for corruption. You can never eliminate it. Even in the most developed countries, there is corruption, perhaps not to the extent that we have it in some of our countries, the global south. But we are heading in that direction in terms of trying to make that human interface. Dr. Pachauri mentioned about the passport. So, I'll give you an example. Just a few days ago, I got a call from a friend in Dubai. His son-in-law is American, but of Pakistani origin. So they have to get clearance from the Mumbai police, because the in-laws were staying there, or the family was staying there, whatever. So he is ringing me up saying, can you help? Because the visa, he's got a visa, but we didn't bribe the policeman, so he's going to cancel it. I said, he can't cancel it. He said, no, but he will give an adverse report, and at the station, at the airport, the person will be turned away. And I tried to tell him that, it won't happen, it should not happen, but God forbid it does happen, keep the name and telephone number of a lawyer handy, so that, you can move them. And then after 2 days, very sheepishly, he wrote back saying nothing happened. I said, I told you. So I think sometimes perceptions, again, I come back to that word perception. So I think it's, things have changed for the better, certainly. But again, lot to be done. I mean, the road in front of my parents, they're both dead now, but where they lived, every monsoon it breaks down, it's repaired, and before the next monsoon sets in, it's already got, so obviously somebody is on the take there, whether it's the MCD or the engineer or whoever. So these problems will persist. We are a very large country, but we try and eliminate them as much as possible if we can eliminate the human interface. You cannot entirely eliminate it, so there will always be scope for corruption. So that's where civic sense that Budhiraja mentioned, I think it's very important that everybody gets some civic sense. Look at the way people drive. It's a nightmare driving in Delhi. All of you drive in Delhi. I mean, it's something that all my life I've driven in Delhi, and I feel that now I'm scared. I mean, my son says put a dash cam, and I didn't even know what a dash cam was till he explained to me what the benefits of having a dash cam is.
Okay, two more questions, please.
So, first of all, thank you so much for all your intriguing insights. And my question is related to the fact that balancing social equity alongside meritocracy is a big challenge, and we have a big country. So, what's your take on how we could be taking this as in the coming future?
Okay, so I missed out some questions, but your question is actually up there, which is here, all right? So this is the question now, and I'll put it to the panel, which is, you know, all these youngsters are going to be soon looking for jobs. And our constitution prescribed a quota of 22.5%. And they envisaged it for a limited period rather than eternity. That 22.5% has been increasing. Courts put a 50% limit, but many states are gone beyond it. And there's at least 30 states who've gone beyond that. So, is there a solution, and what is it, where this balance between meritocracy and social equity?
I think it's a very relevant question for these youngsters. You can't hope to get government jobs. It's not easy. You've got to, there's a quota system there also in the government. But I think the only hope that lies, and it's quite open and quite welcome, is startups. A lot of people are becoming millionaires by going in for these startups and self-ventures, as you might call it. So some of you will also have to go in for skill training. If you get a particular skill training is a very important thing, and it adds to human resource development also. I think that's the answer. Go in for startups and don't try to be all the time hoping to get a government job. Now recently, Tejasvi Yadav, in his election campaign, he says every household in Bihar, I'll give a government job. Now, you know, politicians will make promises, but then do they have the money to give a government job to everybody? It's a sad thing for a peon's job, for a peon or mere attendant in an office. You have MA degree people and BA degree, PhDs also lining up. For a constable's job, there is a lineup of graduates and postgraduates for a constable's job. So degrees are becoming cheap. There are far too many degrees, but the market is shrunk. So the only thing is that you go in for self-ventures. And with your management training, I'm sure you've got some bright ideas, and I'm sure you'll be able to do very well in that.
Just to supplement what Dr. Pachauri said, employment generation, startups. India, I think most of the youth aspire for government jobs because they feel that is available. It's not. I mean, I was on the UPSC board earlier this year, and I found, I mean, people from IITs, medical doctors, all appearing for the IAS or one of the civil services. And when you ask them, your studies, etc., they said, no, but you know, as a doctor, what do I get? Where do I go? Here I have a much better opportunity. I said, but yeah, you do, but will you get in? That is the point, because the competition is so, it's like a steep pyramid. It's next to impossible, especially if you're not even among the quotas, it's become so difficult. But if you're a general cadre person, you can forget about it. You may be, 100%, it's luck, it's like a lottery. So that is the problem. We rely too much on government jobs. There has to be employment generation in the private sector so that the youth who are educated can get employed. Some obviously need to be upskilled also, and I think the book talks about this in some detail, not just about quotas, but also about upskilling, about education, about preparing the youth for the future. So I would really recommend that you read this book.
In this context, I just want to make a suggestion. We didn't talk about the delivery of justice, because eventually getting a job is also delivery of justice. You see, now we are going in, a lot of people go and fight and litigate in the courts. But one way out is that you go in for this mediation and conciliation. You see, you choose understanding over victory. You have understanding over victory. You have conversation over requests, over conquest, conversation over conquests, and healing over harm. And courts decide mediation heals. Justice delivery system also has a very big role to play, because for jobs also people go to courts, fighting for their rights to get a job. So we must use mediation methods to try to
I'm still
improve our delivery system, justice delivery system.
I'm still going to bat on behalf of the person who asked the question, because the issue of the quotas being unfair to meritocracy is really not addressed in that. But it's fallen the too hard tray for now. Last question. Okay. Somebody.
Good evening. Thank you for the session. Really looking forward to read the book. So we all know how India is deeply rooted in its cultural strength and democratic values. So how can we use this to boost our global reputation?
So, this is another question that I had not asked. So thank you for bringing it up, which is a soft power question. All right. So our soft power is our culture, our food, our yoga, our democratic values. So yes, please.
So I think, what you're asking is a very fundamental question. Every country faces that challenge. Some people do it more successfully, and I must say we haven't done it all that well. For instance, when the Prime Minister led the effort for the International Day of Yoga, that was very successful. And why was it successful? Because yoga was already prevalent in the West. In the US, for instance, in Europe, people were doing yoga and they were fascinated by yoga. So when the Prime Minister rose in the UN in New York and spoke about yoga and the benefits of yoga, he had a natural constituency. And India became the leader. India became, in fact, there were a group of countries that opposed, saying our faith doesn't allow it. And then it explained to them that it's not a matter of faith. And everybody adopted it. So that's soft power, as Rajeev was saying. But when you talk about democracy, I think we like to say we are one of the oldest democracies. I come from Bihar, so you had the Lichavi republics in the 6th century BCE. Now, nobody knows that except us here, because we are told about it. Now, obviously, we need to, because they think that Greece is the fountainhead of democracy. But much before Greece, we had a semblance of democracy. Let's not call it universal. For instance, universal franchise. India is not the first even in South Asia. Sri Lanka got it before us. But our size, and we talked about it earlier, the mammoth election exercise. So there are certain aspects, our cuisine. Now, when I was surveying, when I used to ask the Indian Council for Cultural Relations or the Ministry of Culture for money to capitalize on Bollywood, they would get annoyed with me. They said, "तुम्हें picture देखना जाके खुद देखो, और हमसे पैसे क्यों मांग रहे हो?" But the fact is that in 1985, when Amitabh Bachchan came to Cairo, you should have seen the sort of, the impact that it had. We underplay our soft paths, and it needn't be our ancient glory. It can be, of course, our ancient glory, but also what we offer today, whether it's Bollywood or music or cuisine, our food. I mean, when I was in Italy, there was not a single Indian restaurant. Now you go there, you find the best Indian cuisine all over. So these are soft power tools that the government is trying to harness. It will take time, but some of it happens even without the government. It happens because it suddenly becomes a fad or a craze. But you're right, we really need to capitalize on our soft power tools.
I'll just make one point on this. You see, I had gone to Russia some time ago with the children's NGO, and we were going around in the evening, so we thought that Russia is the land of vodka, so we'd like to have a drink of vodka and see what is all about, what Russian vodka is like. So we approached this gentleman who was the convener. We said, "Bhai, can we have a drink?" He says, "No, sorry, I'm a Rama Bhakta. I don't drink." So it's as though it's not there. It's very much there. Rama Bhaktas are there all over the world, and everybody knows about Raj Kapoor. Mera Juta Hai Kapani. Everybody knows about it. So there are some positives also.
Okay, so I know we're well over time. Last short question from me to the panel. To reiterate, we've seen how India has progressed, and there's no denying that, and I think we all take a lot of pride in where India is today. coming back to one of the core objectives of the book was not critiquing where we are today, but urging more of governance to achieve the potential as to where India can be or could be, right? So, in that context, clearly mindset plays an important role. And to all the youngsters in the room, what is the mindset that they should have so that India over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, can become the country which is known even for its governance. So that can become a soft power which we sell to the international world.
I have an answer to this. You see, in 1947 when we became free, one of the biggest opportunities we had was to introduce compulsory education. Suppose compulsory education had been introduced in India at the primary level and at the school level, where would India have been today? With 100% population educated in maths and science, we would have been right on top. So that was one of our major, what you call handicaps, or you can say one of the major lapses that this country. So I would say that whoever is concerned about developing the country and making it Atmanirbhar, as you mentioned just now, education, 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 I think that's the answer. And health, health, health.
I'm going to give a different spin, because what Dr. Pachauri said is absolutely correct. And the book talks about it in great detail, about health, education, etc. But from a perspective of someone who's been abroad, lived abroad, the difference in mindset, you talk about mindset, of Indians going abroad 40 years ago, and you would appreciate that because you stayed abroad for long periods of time, and going now. At one time, going abroad was a luxury. People would look up, acha passport hai, kahan America ja rahe hain, ya England ja rahe hain, wherever, to study or for tourism. Now it's so common, everybody goes. But there's a catch. I don't know if you've heard of the term ugly American. Now what's happening is, unfortunately, ugly Indian is the term being used. And I saw it in the US this time. And the reason why I'm saying it is, again, it boils down to civic sense that you talked about. We have to be mindful of the other people. We go to a restaurant, we talk loudly, we laugh loudly. People in those countries are polite. You don't hear people shouting, talking. We in India are very boisterous people, especially from the north. We are very boisterous people. We carry that abroad. And then we get that moniker or fortunate thing of being an ugly Indian. And in the US, of course, there is envy against Indians who are doing the best. But Americans have told me that because of certain, that the Indians are being typified as being loud, boisterous, and not mindful of their fellow, so not citizens, but people who live in that country, not mindful of their traditions and culture of that country. Now that pained me, because we are not like, we are generally not that sort of people, but that's the reputation we are acquiring. So if there is a reaction in the US, if there's a reaction in the UK and Europe, just remember that they will use this as an excuse only, because they are jealous of your success in Silicon Valley or wherever. They need something to peg you back. And I won't go into H-1B visas, we misuse H-1B visas, but that's a different topic. So the mindset has to be, when you go abroad, please be acutely mindful of your environment and be sensitive to what that country or those people expect of you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And we're over time. Thank you very much.
What an enriching exchange of ideas this has been. We are truly grateful to all our guests for their thoughtful contributions. As we near the close of this evening, we would like to take a moment to extend a warm gesture of thanks. May I first invite Dr. Professor Sonu Goyal ma'am to present a token of our gratitude to Srimati Budhiraja. May I now invite Dr. Shilpi Tripathi to present a token of appreciation to Shri Rajeev Budhiraja. May I now invite Kavita Gaur ma'am to present a token of appreciation to Dr. S.K. Pachauri. And finally, may I invite Kalyan sir to present a token of appreciation to Shri Yash Sinha. Bringing this evening to a close, we offer our heartfelt thanks to Srimati Manorama Budhiraja, Shri Rajeev Budhiraja, Dr. S.K. Pachauri, and Shri Yash Sinha for their gracious presence this evening. Thank you all for joining us. We request the guests to move to the upper lobby for high tea. We request the audience to kindly remain seated.